Welcome, Peter Hitchens, to Moscow. It's good to have you here.
Always a pleasure to be here.
For the viewers, Peter came to Moscow in order to moderate a debate that I had last night with Andrew Sullivan on the subject of same-sex marriage. And the event drew a large crowd, a fairly orderly crowd, I thought. And I wanted to spend at least a little bit of time walking through some of the issues that the debate raised. Thank you for moderating it. Thank you for your engagement and your entertainment value in in keeping us all in line.
I endeavor to give satisfaction.
Yes. Peter Leithart, who was there last night, wrote a post-debate commentary for First Things, and he was highlighting the issue that Christians have, the challenge that Christians have in explaining a Christian vision for marriage and a Christian vision for anything, actually, to this generation, which seems to be badly educated, misinformed, and to the extent that folks are educated and are informed, they've got a completely different paradigm for processing information. And it seems to me that that in some ways, when we're debating same-sex marriage, we're trying to catch a train that left the station half an hour ago. Do you have that same sense, or what would your observations be about?
Well, longer than half an hour ago, I think. It's an argument which is about a symptom of a much greater revolution which has already happened.
Right.
And against which hardly anybody has fought. Rather than, as it's so often, I feel, mistakenly portrayed, as a part of the general assault upon Christian marriage. Right. The assault on Christian marriage really took place long before, as I think we discussed last night, partly thanks to the contraceptive pill and the implications of that, and then because of the extraordinary divorce reforms which came into existence in your country and mine in the 1960s.
We call them no-fault divorces. What
well, it's not so much no fault. I mean, that is an element of it, but it was once described to me, and it's always stuck in my mind as being the most graphic explanation of what's happened. Under the new arrangements, a mutual pledge made by two people to each other, privately but powerfully, has been transformed by law into a pledge which can be revoked at will by one party. And the party who wishes to maintain the marriage and to stick by the original vows can, in the end, be dragged by force under threat of prison from the family home. Mm-hmm. And this immense invasion of privacy and liberty, once understood in that form, can be seen for what it is, but most people don't see it that way. It's not a matter of no fault, it's a matter of ultimate state power to destroy marriage and will.
Basically, all the leverage has been granted to the party who wants to break the vow.
Yes, and that is the weight of the state, not merely in terms of formal law, in terms of what happens when one party seeks to break up the marriage, but also in the disposition of property and the custody of children afterwards. Okay. The presumption is all against the person who wants to maintain the marriage.
If so, would you agree then? This was something that was said at the debate, and it was one small intersection where Andrew and I agreed. But would you also agree that homosexuals, the press for gay marriage, the press for same-sex marriage, is simply vandals running around in the ruins of a great city? They didn't ruin it. They didn't capture it. They didn't overthrow it.
I think that's true. I mean, there are elements of it which I think an intelligent person can criticize and indeed oppose, because there are parts of the argument in its favor which are fundamentally either dishonest or wrong. But in terms of whether it is the great threat to marriage that it's portrayed as, no. Marriage is a ruin, as you rightly say, right. And in it we scurry about.
So we're not we're not in the situation where if we don't fight off this assault on Christian marriage, the institution's going to die. We died a while ago, and we need to be praying for a resurrection now.
Oh, let's not be too sure about died, but certainly were very badly damaged. And reforms and recoveries do happen.
Right.
They're not impossible. I think the 18th century in England establishes that. The revival of the Christian religion from almost complete collapse
Right.
in England at that time was the most astonishing achievement and shows it can be done. So we don't necessarily say it's all up, but
Right.
what's wrong with this cause is not just that it won't make much difference if we win.
Right.
Is that it's also an elephant trap into which conservatives are lured to make them look foolish by their opponents. So someone such as Andrew Sullivan very eloquently put his case last night, and very emotionally did it as well, so that it would have had to be a very cruel individual listening to what he said who could have dismissed out of hand the plea that he was making. Though the use of emotion to trump reason always seems to me to be slightly suspect. But the point is that because of this approach, the person who opposes same-sex marriage will be very easily portrayed as a bigot and as a hater and as all kinds of other things, which will immediately lose him almost any argument, particularly among the college generation.
And is that what you mean by elephant trap? So why don't we maneuver you into a position where we can plausibly call you this list of names that we have lined up?
That's right.
Right.
And in we come. Here we come again, charging across the horizon, straight into the great big pit which has been dug for us.
Okay. What would you suggest?
Well, I like to think that when I see a pit dug in front of me, I go round it.
Okay. Very good. How does one do that?
Well, partly by not concentrating upon it, partly by not being lured into it, partly by keeping your discourse very, very civilized.
Right.
Last night was an example of how to do it, as opposed to it so often is
Screeching and...
Yeah, but it was only possible because in Andrew Sullivan you had an exceptional individual who is intelligent and educated enough to despise the low tricks which so many of his allies will automatically reach for.
Right. And if, so going back to the point about not pronouncing Christian marriage dead quite yet, seems to me that we have to make a distinction between Christian marriage as practiced by the many faithful Christians who are still living in the old order. They're keeping their vows. They intend to keep them. Andrew brought this up last night when he was quoting what Jesus taught. There are many Christians in the first century who, despite the fact that all the laws were against them, lived faithfully in terms of what God expected. And it seems to me that we have many, many Christians who are keeping their vows, who understand their vows properly, who are living the way they ought to, and they're going to be there. So Christian marriage is by no means dead in that sense. But you might call Christendom marriage is dead, sort of the cultural expectation of everybody else.
The assumption that we live in a society which is Christian
right.
is one that I think Christians have to discard. Mm-hmm. It is, if we had expected a law to be passed saying your country is no longer Christian, against which we could fight in open battle, then we were foolish. It was never going to happen like that. It's happened by a salami slicing process. And we now wake up and find that we do not live in a Christian country. Therefore, to some extent, we simply have to demonstrate by our own practice that what we believe in is as good as we think it is.
Mm-hmm. And we have many arguments in the conservative world here, on the Christian right, on the religious right. We have many back and forth arguments about whether America in its founding was Christian. And I think they're compelling arguments for saying it was and is, and our institutions presuppose the biblical framework and all of that. But to your point, it's not a open question. In England, the Queen is the head of the church, and it's an established church, but that doesn't keep it from being a secular nation.
But this is a cardboard frontage concealing an emptiness.
Right.
We could not, for instance, and this will, alas, inevitably come to be proved in the foreseeable future, we could not hold a coronation service of the kind which we held in 1953 now. Mm-hmm. And the profoundly Christian nature of it, and the Christian affirmation of the basis of our Constitution could not be made in that form, and will not the next time. Mm-hmm. And the only reason the frontage continues to stand is because an individual still lives.
Right.
But when she's no longer there, it'll be clear that it's gone.
Now, I've understood that Elizabeth is defender of the faith. Charles would like to be defender of faiths, something like that. Or nice thoughts, defender of nice thoughts.
I think, excuse me, I think that's unfair on Charles, who I think thinks quite profoundly about it, and who I think said what he said because he had that feeling that many of us have, that those of us who do believe in a godly order need to huddle together for warmth a bit with other people who feel the same way, even if we don't agree with them about much else. And I don't think you should make too much out of that. But it's not within his power, I don't think, to demand a return to a
robust,
holy Christian constitution.
Okay. So if I'm hearing you rightly...
Well, I should add that judges in our courts have specifically ruled that Christianity bears no particular weight in judgments over moral questions.
Okay. All right. So for American conservatives to pass an amendment to the Constitution, naming Jesus, isn't going to forestall the salami slicing process.
No. I'm always reminded of the Louis Nice poem, Bagpipe Music. The glass is falling hour by hour. The glass will fall forever, and if you break the bloody glass, you won't hold up the weather. You don't change fundamental circumstances by passing symbolic laws.
Right. Thank you.